Quick disclaimer before this video begins, this is an 8th part to a series. You can watch a recap of 1 through 5 and then watch 6 and 7, link to those in the description, or you can just watch the entire series by clicking the eye icon in the upper right corner. The Pandora A61, otherwise known as the Pandora's Box Missile, was an ICBM designed as a last resort in the case of Australia facing defeat. Able to go up to 17,000 miles per hour, the Pandora A61 could reach any continent within 45 minutes. Virtually undetectable, even if it was caught on radar, it'd be nearly impossible to shoot down due to a graphene compound used as the outer shell. However, a missile is nothing without its payload, and the payload on the Pandora was arguably more powerful than any nuclear warhead. Instead of using explosives, Pandora used living creatures, a bioweapon of sorts. There were 3 pods within the shell, each 6 feet long and 3 feet wide. Each pod had its own stage. The first pod would release as the missile set into the landing stage in order to prevent tampering with it. Once the missile had landed, it would shoot out the second pod. There would then be a 50-minute timer before the last and most deadly stage would be released. And when Ohio was about to take over Australia, they launched the missile, directly at the capital of Ohio, which was located in what was once the original state of Ohio. Everything went exactly as planned for the missile. It landed in a forested area near the capital, dropping out drop bears for protection. While the drop bears protected the missile, it launched a second pod out, which turned into an automatic turret which would launch textile cone snails at anything that came too close, demanding they surrender, otherwise they would lose everything to this missile. Ohio, of course, refused to surrender, and 15 minutes later, right as Ohio was about to take over Australia, the missile launched its final capsule out. At first there was rejoicing because nothing came out of it. No explosion, no creatures, no anything. But that's when the humming noise started. It sounded like a swarm of bees, but worse. And from there, everything went wrong. Inside that last container was a swarm of Goliath bird-eating spiders. But even worse, they had wings and were able to rapidly breed. Within an hour, Ohio had lost the capital city to them. An executive decision was quickly made. They had to burn down the state. So without hesitation, they lit what was once the state of Ohio on fire. At first, it seemed like it was working, and the sacrifice had saved them, but out of the fire came the Goliath bird-eating spiders, which were very much alive, now on fire, and even more upset. A second executive decision was made, and they used a thruster system implanted in the state, which was inspired by Texas, to launch it into space, completely removing the spiders from the face of the planet and into orbit around the Earth. As Ohio was distracted by the spiders, the remainder of Australia fled to New Zealand, leaving Ohio with an empty country. Ohio gave chase only to discover that New Zealand had switched locations with a different Zealand, named Old Zealand, which promptly became Old Ohio. There was a brief moment of celebration before things began to go wrong again. After the state of Ohio had been sent into orbit, it was discovered that there were large tunnels running underneath the surface of the Earth, and out of those tunnels came the army of Sealand. As it turns out, when Sealand got pulled down the drain, it didn't get destroyed, but rather relocated under the planet's crust. And they had spent that time building an army up and preparing for war. Unprepared for an attack from within, Ohio rapidly lost land until they were able to stabilize themselves by relocating troops back to North America. However, as things often do, it got worse. Ohio had turned a blind eye to Florida, and Florida had gotten around their barricade by riding on the backs of alligators to Ukraine, which was formerly known as Russia before Ukraine took it over. And not only did they take over Ukraine, they combined with them, creating a horrible crossbreed between Ukrainians and Floridians that was seemingly invincible to everything. And they immediately began hammering away at the land Ohio had taken in Asia. Ohio, torn between 2 battlefronts, had to make a choice: abandon Asia, leaving the continent for the Floridians, allowing them to grow in strength, or put all of their men into crushing them and leaving North America to potentially be lost to Sealand. Before they were able to make a choice, a mysterious being that was 3 feet tall, wore a cloak, and sounded suspiciously like a bird appeared. Without a word, it created a large hole in central Russia, giving them access to the tunnels before leaving. The Floridians pulled back their armies from Asia and sent them down to investigate the new hole, where they stumbled across Sealand's army and began fighting them. Sealand pulled all of its troops back to face this new threat, and Florida sent its troops down the tunnels to keep Sealand from invading. While they were busy with this, Ohio seized the opportunity and plugged both the holes with cement and dirt, the equivalent of sweeping a problem under the rug and hoping it doesn't come back to bite you later. With both these threats gone, Ohio quickly recovered and took over the land Florida had taken, solidifying its defenses against Western Europe. Ohio finally seemed to be getting a steady grip on the world, and nope, scratch that. A little over a week after Sealand and Florida got contained in the tunnels, their series of fights led to major tunnels around the world collapsing and being filled with water. These series of continent-wide canals were appropriately called the Divides. While these canals were mildly inconvenient, they didn't necessarily stop Ohio's plans. But they did, however, give a very strong boost to Kyrgyzstan, who had been building the world's largest navy using dry docks, even though they were also the world's most landlocked country. This is what ended up interfering with Ohio's plans. Immediately, Kyrgyzstan started sending out ships going on naval bombing runs along Ohio's territory. Ohio's navy, when they put up an effort against Kyrgyzstan, was crushed due to the confusion and the sheer numbers of the opposing fleets. Ohio attempted to attack via land, however, the divides had formed a moat of sorts around the country, and any attempts to cross were brutally stopped, forcing Ohio to pull back. After weeks of failed attempts, Ohio was running out of ideas. But this time, luck appeared to be on Ohio's side, as a major storm blew through the area, causing massive flooding, and Kyrgyzstan's navy was forced to draw back to the ports to avoid potentially sinking. This left the boats as sitting ducks. The storm lasted 6 hours. Kyrgyzstan was defeated within 4 of those. Ohio's luck had turned around, and for once they were actually gaining ground. Things were working out well for them, a bit too well, and knowing how this series is going so far, odds are some events going to happen that will cause them to lose a massive amount of land, but I suppose we'll have to see.